Kingdoms Forlorn vs. Kingdom Death Monster.
We start with hello, welcome to Quackalope. Today we are going to be comparing Kingdoms Forlorn with Kingdom Death Monster.
A head-to-head comparison, a genuine look at a prototype edition and a finished game that both of us, caveat there, absolutely love. Like, KDM is a 5 out of 5 for both of us. Yep. It has grown in Shira's rankings of board games. Might even make her top 10 one day down the road.
We're so proud of that.
I am very proud of that. So let me give everyone the format of this video and a ton of context. But before we dive into that, I also want to announce we are giving away
a base pledge.
A pledge of Kingdoms Forlorn. So if you're excited about possibly getting your hands on this game, if you want a copy sent to your door, we're going to be doing it through Pledge Manager credit, so it'll be literally through your account. You'll need to back it for $1, and then we'll up it, and you could always add extra things to it, so anyone is eligible for this, even if you're already going all in. What you need to do is 3 things. 1, you need to hit the like button. 2, you need to leave a comment down below saying what type of weird abomination would you introduce to the Kingdoms Forlorn environment? And if it's hard for you, for instance...
Right now there's an egghead.
This is an egg knight. You could just say, like, a salary lord or a broccoli entrepreneur. I don't know. Whatever you want, just leave some weird comment down below and we'll count it. And the last thing you need to do is you need to make sure you subscribe to the channel, because here's the caveats around this giveaway. This video is going to get 10,000 views, easily. There's a Kingdom Death fan base here that absolutely wants to know the head-to-head on this. We will trigger the giveaway the moment we cross 1,000 likes on this video. That's the rule. If we never hit 1,000 likes, we're never giving it away. I'm going to keep it for myself and play it all alone. So, format of the video.
With that,
this video is going to break down the best, or the stuff in this game that is better than Kingdom Death,
the stuff in this that is worse than Kingdom Death,
and the stuff in this that is different than Kingdom Death. Now, let me go ahead and establish caveats because it's the only fair thing to do here. This is a prototype copy that I'm working with. It is an unfinished game with an unfinished rulebook with an unfinished set of iconography, rules, conditions. There is a vlog where you can watch me slam my head against this for 12 hours figuring out how to play it.
And he didn't stop there, slamming his head against it. He has still slammed his head for like another 10, 15 hours after that.
I've played through the campaign about twice now, given some hiccups and stumbles and like rules checking along the way. You've played through an entire prototype session with me, which you can go over and watch. Alex from Board Game Co. played as well there. And here's the caveats that I want to establish. This is not how the game is actually designed to be handed out. And I sent the publisher an email saying, I think they really have done themselves a disservice by sending a copy of the game that requires you to be balanced around 4 players. Because as someone that has 2 people primarily to play games with, this isn't how we're going to experience Kingdoms Forlorn. The promise of the publisher is that the game will be eventually balanced around 1 character, or if Shira and I are going out,
2 characters,
around 2.
Or if Alex decides to join us, 3 characters. It'll be balanced around each individual player account so that it can be played at multiple player levels.
The idea, the concept that is here is the idea of a solo operative, meaning I should be able to sit down and dive in as an individual player. Take that same character that's leveled up and progressed into another campaign. Have Alex come from his solo game and go on one cool adventure together. And the promise there is awesome. And the framework for that promise is really, genuinely here. But the caveat being, this was not the way we should have experienced Kingdoms Forlorn. It wasn't at a point of being refined, finished, or the way I think they want the game to be played when it actually comes to it. This, for the Kingdom Death fans out there, was like being dropped into a campaign you've never played before, with monsters and creatures you've never faced before,
facing a nemesis
with gear cards
in
and
Lantern
items
Year
you've never
25.
used before in Lantern Year 25.
Yeah. With that, I'm also going to add to that caveat that, in general, I don't think it is fair, necessarily, for us to bash or give a hard time to a game that is not ready to be reviewed. I think this game needed a lot more development, so take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Which is the reason for Kickstarter.
Right. It is the reason for Kickstarter. It gives them time and space to develop it more. But
if you want to pull punches, I'll throw Kingdom Death under the bus a little bit. Kingdoms Forlorn is farther along than Kingdom Death ever was when it was funded, and it will arrive before Kingdom Death actually ships Wave 4. Just for a conversation point. What were you saying, though?
No, I feel like I have a pretty decent amount of things that I have criticisms about this game. But I also feel like it's not totally fair because this is still a massive prototype.
Yeah.
But I also think that, on the other hand, publishers should take responsibility and don't send the game out until they're ready to have it bashed and reviewed.
Yeah,
so,
until the conversation is there. So we're going to have the conversation.
We're going to have the conversation because we have the game.
The last thing I want to establish, the last thing I want to say is the team over, the creators, I forget, it's like Forgotten Kingdoms or something like that. I forget the official name of the company. Is it here? It is here. Into the Unknown. The team over at Into the Unknown has genuinely been available and responsive. Yeah. They have followed up with, just now, I just checked my email, and they'd sent me back graphics updates of cards from the first set of critiques I had. Yeah. Making the iconography on the trail cards that we had way clearer and way easier to read for everyone sitting around the table. Making the cards that allow you to gain heat, instead of just having the heat symbol, it says gain heat now.
Oh, cool.
Instead of having that miscommunication of, am I spending it, am I getting it, where's that conversation going? So, and
they're receptive to changes, which is a really positive thing to hear.
They made a player aid just for me.
Yeah.
Because I needed it.
Yeah.
And so they are receptive to changes. I've offered the invite to them. I've let them know I'm filming this video. And I've said, I'm happy to get on the phone. I'm happy to have a conversation, a call, and help this become the thing I think it can be.
Yeah.
And I want it to be for the audience. So let's start by digging into what is better here. And you said you don't have a ton.
I don't have a ton.
Okay.
The one thing that I want to highlight and stress upon that I think that Kingdoms Forlorn does better than KDM is the narrative character story arc behind each person that you are going with. There is like 60, 80 pages of story,
in the prototype,
narration about what your character is trying to achieve in each mission, what they're going for, who they are as a backstory, and you really start to feel their personality. We were saying after we were playing the game that it was almost like it was a book that I wanted to read and just find out what happens as if it was a story. But I get to play it, and I get to make changes, and I get to have some interaction with it. And so I thought they did that really well. I was excited to play as Kara. I was excited to hear that she was sassy and driven and stubborn and pretty similar to me. She even has the red hair. It felt really similar to playing myself in kind of one of these medieval stories with my flaws and my advantages. Yeah. So I love that about this, and I think that is also going to belong in the category of ways that Kingdoms Forlorn is different than Kingdom Death, because this stresses the story of the individual characters. You don't necessarily have your story of your settlement and what you have gone through as a group. You have the story of what you personally have gone through, which could be interesting as you're diving in solo. You want to know what you're doing. You don't necessarily care about all the other people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on story. That's one of the highest ranking things for me here, and it's not a light thing. I cannot undersell just how good the writing is so far in this. If this was a book, I would be reading it. I would be consuming it hungrily. The stories all have twists and turns. You start reading through a page and you realize it's not what you were assuming at all. For instance, Flesh Ritter here. Yeah. You start reading and you think he's like a gladiatorial knight going to, waging war, and he's talking about him like muscles bursting, and then you realize he's consuming the last creature that he just slew, and he's like one of the greatest knights, but he's the Butcher Knight, and the Butcher Knight goes out and hunts creatures specifically to bring them back, cook them, and create potions and salves, and imbue themselves with the strength of whatever they're able to get their hands on.
Walking out with a hatchet to kill things.
He's so cool, and every character has their own narrative journey, and it really does feel like the term they've coined is the solo operative adventure, and it really does feel like you're playing as some cool, unique character in this weird, twisted world, and you've got your own motivations, and you're encouraged to not always work with the tribe, and some things that help you don't always help everyone else. And I like that. I like that a lot. I like this so much that if they get it balanced around playing as an individual character, for the story alone, I will continue exploring one after another after another.
It reminds me almost like Destinies, where each character has their own story and what they're trying to piece together and have their own mission, while you're also working in that you're working competitively.
Yeah.
But while here you're working cooperatively to kind of take down these beasts.
So some of the other things that I have on the better side of this is going to be that conversation around the adventure and the solo mode of the game. I can't say that I think this will actually be better solo than Kingdom Death, but it depends on what you, the audience, are looking for. If you're looking for something that steps away from the settlement building, right, that doesn't just slaughter your characters in a single pass, this does that adventure side of the gameplay really, really well, and I would argue does personalized character stories and personalized adventure modules probably better than Kingdom Death when it actually comes push to shove. If I was setting both down, if I wanted something that was like balance all 4 characters and run the settlement mode, I would go with Kingdom Death. But if I wanted something where I could feel like I was playing a heroic dungeon crawl or heroic boss battler, I really like what they're presenting here. Finally,
I do think though that you can still die here. Like
you can, but the death is not permanent.
Right. So that's a difference.
It's a fail forward.
Yeah.
The death doesn't take you out of the game. The death is a supplement and it has negative consequences, but it doesn't reset you.
Just in case you miss the death.
Yeah.
Like I do.
Well, okay, fair enough. Swinging down to kind of the last thing that I have on the strictly better than list here is going to be the nature of cooperative gameplay here. Now, this is something that I think is a little bit viscous. It's a little bit hard to see through because we're working with a prototype. But Kingdom Death has strategic gameplay sitting around the table. You're talking about what you want to do. Every now and then you get to surge or dash or move around. But really, when one player is going and the rest of the game kind of pauses around that scene. What they're trying to do here in Kingdoms Forlorn is something that mixes up that cooperative gameplay a little bit more. You're adding tokens to the pool that affect everyone. You're getting resources that everyone has the option to use. You have cards that you could play on everyone else's turn, and that happens during the exploration phase, the delve phase, and during the showdown phase, or the clash phase. Mm-hmm. And I do think that idea of cooperative play, you having the option to roll and take our hits, us having the ability to play a card to buff you or give you a result that's going to be slightly better than what you could do on your own, does work really well.
Playing devil's advocate, though, I do think you get that feeling with Kingdom Death. This might do it a little bit better, but you do get that feeling. Like, I can call and wake you, like, stand you up.
Absolutely.
I can surge and take another action, and you are talking with whoever you're playing with and making those decisions like, I can do this type of hit much better than you can. Stand back. Let me at him.
So I'm specifically talking, I don't disagree with you. I think the collaborative puzzle of Kingdom Death is right now better. However, I think the idea of true cooperative play, where actions that I take are directly benefiting you, I think this is doing that better. And I think it is viscous. I see promise of something that I cannot say that whether or not the publisher will deliver it. But if you have a group of 4 players that want to sit down around the table, I don't think Kingdom Death is good at 4. No. I've ran 4 and 5 player groups, and our hope is often one person doesn't show up. Because it is a fun project, but you usually aren't doing as much. Kingdom Death is best when you're running 2 characters, because you get to take 2 actions, you get to die a little bit more, you don't get knocked out. Whereas here with this, if you're running 4 players around the table, and everyone has their own motivations, but everyone also knows their entire skill tree, they've been able to choose their cards, they've been able to choose up their heroic paths and their cursed paths, they're able to really play to their proficiencies, I think 4 players will have a better experience here when it comes to collaborative play.
That's fair. I would agree.
Let's talk about strictly different now.
Strictly different. So what I have under strictly different is the fact that in Kingdom Death, you have the hunt phase, you have the showdown phase, and then you have the settlement phase. Here, you have an exploration phase, kind of, then you have a mob battle, then you have another exploration phase, and then you have a boss battle.
So that was the structure of the prototype.
Okay.
It is kind of like that, but one caveat would be the way we triggered the showdown, the mob battle, will not always be the same. Sometimes you'll just make it to the boss. Sometimes you'll be thrust into 2 or 3 mob battles across the course of a story.
So it's variable.
It'll depend on the world quite a bit.
Whereas Kingdom Death is a lot more predictable unless you get surprised with like Nemesis or something, or
and even
a special showdown.
You know they're coming.
Yeah. This was a lot more unpredictable and had, I would say, a lot more exploration. Mm-hmm. I would say that is one of the key differences that I've picked up on.
Yeah, we haven't had a chance to see how the game strictly progresses, but it doesn't do it in a settlement sense.
Yeah.
There's a little end note here where it talks about going back into a kingdom to gain more resources, hunt the Egg Knight again, get more items and gear cards. So you do have the idea of choosing the action cards that you bring out. Because your hand limit, Shira, so all of these
everyone
cards...
has a hand limit of 5.
But here's the cool thing. All of these cards are extra cards they just sent that are special classes and abilities that if we were going to really dive into another gameplay of this, we would choose... Them. We would handpick our cards, getting maybe more unique abilities. We would handpick these. Because you see those blue and red cards over there?
Yeah, you can lay them on top.
The abilities and benefits you get change as well. And the items that you get. We'd be able to draft things like the Yoke Spear and go out and try to take that for a spin. But that is not the same as innovating, building, bringing resources back. It's kind of like getting rewards in a dungeon crawl and then diving back in. The strict difference for me, just like you're talking about, is the fact that they've taken... The showdown phase is still here. But instead of a 2-hour-long showdown campaign, they've squished those into like 30-minute pockets. A little bit more punchy, a little bit more quick, and oftentimes is going to escalate to a dramatic success or a dramatic failure quickly. You're not going to have it drag out. I've been stuck in a white lion's teeth just being chewed on for hours.
Really? That sounds so much fun.
For hours.
Yeah, you get to rip him apart more.
And they've taken the hunt phase.
They died too quickly for me.
They've taken the hunt phase of this and, like you said, increased the exploration. So instead of having this point where you just go through a series of cards that debuff, buff you, and might cause everything to go haywire, here you're making choices around where you want to explore. There's going to be cards that trigger certain events, certain conditions. You have your own personal narrative and objectives that you're trying to go for, and we had a scaled down version of that exploration.
Yep.
So I think that is a strict difference. Another difference that I have...
The other difference is the fact that there's a mob. In Kingdom Death, you're fighting one person usually.
Well, you haven't fought Spidiculus yet.
Okay.
Spidiculus creates little tiny babies that spawn all over the place.
In general, you're fighting one
You're still
creature.
fighting a boss. So that is an interesting difference here. We do have two different types of scenarios. We have the boss, which is the Egg Knight.
Yep.
But then we have the mob with all the skeletons, the ironclad undead. And the way they operate is that you fight the mob as a whole living organism, with their AI cards affecting one or two at a single time, and then beginning to cycle. And they want to group and push you together. And I actually think the mob rules are really cool. I'd like to see where they explore and branch out. The caveat to that is, I don't think either of the AI, and we'll get into this into the worst, I don't think either of the AI at the moment perform as good as a Kingdom Death hunt or a Kingdom Death showdown. But the mob is different, and the mob, I think, is a unique fight experience.
The mob actually reminds me of Gloomhaven, in a sense. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, when you're fighting different types of the same creatures.
Yep.
And there can even be different levels.
Different levels, different stats.
Yeah.
But it's all the same-ish.
It feels similar.
Yeah, same-ish.
That was the comparison I thought of.
But I thought it worked well. So the last thing that I want to touch on is going to be the main difference in the way that this fights. And this was true with Aeon's Trespass Odyssey, which I haven't had a chance to play, but I'm excited for it to come in so we can do more of these type of conversations. They have this idea of an escalating fight system, an escalating AI system. In Kingdom Death, you have a hunt deck, you have a hit location deck, you have an AI deck, and that gets generated at the start of the showdown. And as you fight, your AI deck trickles down, right? You're cutting into the monster, and you're also taking wounds, getting debuffs, spending survival. And so throughout your battle, you kind of dwindle to a finish. Now, those finishes can be amazing.
Yeah.
And the dwindle to a finish is not a negative in my part. It just is the way that the system works. Here, as you fight, everything continues to ramp up. Every time we do a wound, we're actually putting in a stronger body part. We're upgrading the unit. We're putting in a stronger AI card. It'd be like if you did a wound to a level 1 lion and suddenly shuffled in another level 2 card or an advanced card instead of taking one out of the deck. Along with that, our characters gain power, and power starts unlocking abilities, special characteristics, and upgrades that allow us to buff not only ourselves, but everyone across the board with our two different action phases. Because I could pre-buff you for your turn, which I think is really cool. Again, it's that cooperative interaction. I am going to go into the AI system a little bit more in the next category.
Yes,
but
I was going to say.
But for what it is doing, it is a key difference between how the mobs will eventually run here in Kingdoms Forlorn versus Kingdom Death. In Kingdoms Forlorn, they're squeezing the mobs into a 30-minute encounter, right? And they're escalating the whole way across the board. So you're getting stronger, you're getting more powerful, and that means that the ramp up, instead of having a slow dwindling experience, where like the lion chews on you, you smack it on the butt a little bit,
it lays
gets
down,
angry,
it
lays
finds
down.
a piece of grass, comes back.
In this game, you're going to, by the third or fourth round, be hitting so hard that you're either dying or they're dying, and there's no around that. There's no getting around that. So that's the stuff that I have strictly different.
Yep.
Dive into the stuff that we think is at the moment worse.
Yep.
Okay.
Let's start with that AI deck.
Okay.
I thought it was very, very fiddly to deal with. Constantly having to go through the deck, taking out cards, substituting cards. I felt like it interrupted the gameplay significantly.
Yeah, I actually don't think I mind it as much as you and Alex have. I like the premise of... I like the premise.
Oh, I like the premise of it. I just don't know if there's a better way to do it. It was constantly having... Every single time one player took an action, because...
Every time we're doing damage, we're cycling and shuffling.
Every single time someone did damage, you have to go through that deck, pull something out, switch something around, and yeah, it was very, very fiddly.
Yeah, I agree that it is significantly more fiddly. I think you considering it worse is absolutely fair. For me, I wasn't bothered by it.
I think you like the idea of what it can offer
I do.
more than having to deal with the fiddliness. I think after more plays, you might not appreciate the fiddliness as much.
Yeah, or it might not bug me as much.
Right.
It could be one of those things where you get more fluid with it.
And it could just be a choice, like a preference.
Around the AI for me, because I'm not going to beat up on that when I've got something else that I think is worse around the AI. The boss battles right now don't feel as visceral as Kingdom Deaths do at all. The idea of escalating and ramping powers is cool, but it becomes a little unwieldy at a certain point, and it kind of escalates to this dramatic finish where you chop off its head in about 3 turns, or it swarms you and murders you in a couple of turns. And I like the drawn-out nature of Kingdom Death. Yeah. I like the pinpoint hunt and fight. And here, it feels like they've tried to experiment with and innovate on the AI system of Kingdom Death, but they haven't really found the sweet spot, because honestly, I haven't found a game that does that AI system better than Kingdom Death. And that's a hard spot for a company to be.
Yeah.
They don't want to just copy Kingdom Death's AI system. They're trying to twist the script a little bit, but it just doesn't do it better at the moment. The environments, the characters, they don't feel as alive as every single fight I have with a Kingdom Death character. Yes. The AI system doesn't give the personality and the idea. Like, we got a little taste of it with the Egg Knight. We started picking up that he was like spinning and rolling around the table and smashing into logs and bricks.
But even some of those traits were very hard to put into play and to get the feeling of him. Yeah. It is such a different feeling when you fight the screaming antelope, when you fight the lion, when you fight the phoenix. Every single character in Kingdom Death gives you such a different flavor, and then especially as you start mixing in traits and leveling them up.
Yeah. And so, and it could be partially us playing it wrong. But right now, if you're looking for Kingdoms Forlorn solely as a boss battler, as something to supplement or change Kingdom Death, and you haven't played through all of the expansions that Kingdom Death has to offer, I don't think you're going to find a better boss system here than what already exists in Kingdom Death. And I'm curious to see when Aeon's Trespass arrives, because it shows premise, but I think it needs a lot of refinement and a lot of smoothing out to make every character feel like they have the personality that they deserve. The next thing for me is going to be iconography and action clarity. Mm-hmm. Do you have that on your list?
Oh, yes. Iconography,
okay.
Rulebook, player aid.
These are things, all of those fall into one category. These are things that, like I said, they've sent me an email reaffirming they're working on it. But right now, the iconography throughout the game is really, really hard to read. It's tiny. It's not refined.
It's tiny. It camouflages into the background so that it's not as noticeable. And even when you do see it, the symbols are so similar to each other that we even brought up like a tiny little magnifying glass, because some of the symbols are so similar that you're trying to figure out the minutiae difference between what is heat and what is valor.
Health is a big deal.
Yeah.
And the other issue that I have, because iconography can be fixed, the other issue that I have here is action clarity. Right now, it is very difficult in the prototype that we have to track everything that's happening across the board. It's very hard to like look at my character board and realize that I have benefits and abilities here, special abilities here, general stat upgrades here, weapons that provide
The
extra
general
supplemental
flow
things,
and order
cards that have special abilities, and reactionary
Yeah.
things that the creature has to deal with.
The general flow and sequence of how you trigger things here, what the reactions are, what order everything goes in, when you get to pull cards back, that was a little confusing for me. And I know they created a player aid especially for Jesse because he asked for one. I looked at the player aid and I didn't find it very useful. It didn't have the things that were confusing me. It didn't have what the icons were. It didn't have what the sequence was. It didn't tell me what I did in each phase. And when you're diving into a game for the first time, you do need a more detailed like player aid. As you start getting to know it better, you can simplify that player aid into maybe 2 versions of a player aid, one that's a lot more detailed. I know the community with Kingdom Death has made a lot of player aids as well, which might happen with Kingdoms Forlorn.
Yeah. So for me, the way Kingdom Death creates a structured board where there is still a lot of abilities and I still miss things all the time. But I'm at least looking at my board and at my character sheet. And this feels like there's quite a few other disparate things. Now, again, it could be with the nature, and I'll get to this at the very end of the video, the nature of us being thrown into a 20-year campaign means I felt like I was trying to hold marbles and they just kept slipping out. You got any last things on...
I mean, it's a prototype, so I'm not gonna ding the rule book and like.
Well, you didn't read the rule book.
I didn't read the rule book.
She just might ding me teaching it.
I mean, but I tried. I
rule
looked
book was
through
rough.
I tried to go through the rule book to find rules that I had questions to, and it was rough.
Yeah.
And I know they're still in development, and so I hope it just gets developed better.
I am 100% sure the rulebook will have a lot more refinement. Right now, it's a Word document with some photos.
Next thing I want to target are these tokens.
Okay.
So I did not see any single time where we were able to get those higher power tokens so that we could impact each other's turn. I didn't see any opportunities for the entire game that we played. And granted, that was one session, and we might not have had those cards or anything, but it offered the promise of putting something into play that was super powerful.
So those would have been permanent modifiers.
Right.
And I would assume that some of the events, exploration, or character stories probably led to those. Just in the same way that I played quite a few times and never saw the Saint card come out. But it was cool when it did for you.
Yeah.
The way that we could have been more impactful in coordinating with each other is the action phase at the very end of our round. We could have held back break tokens or point tokens, which are benefits, and instead of using them for our own actions, which we almost always did, we could have given them to the next player. And if we knew the game a little bit better and we were being a little bit more strategic and slowed down a bit, I think that's something that we would have probably done more. I would have taken the gamble of, I probably only need 2 break tokens on this, so let's not put 4 there. Let me put 2 there for your turn, and let me just get what I need to cut through that mob.
But then it's also, you have to remember that you have 2 break tokens left, and there's no easy way to track that necessarily.
Yeah, it's a matter of knowing your characters. It's a matter of knowing your AI board. So the last thing for me on strictly worse here with Kingdoms Forlorn at the moment is going to be character tracking, which is kind of what you just dove into. The character sheets in Kingdom Death, while clunky and while fiddly and while having the fighting arts and fighting arts and disorders and a lot of things you got to track, they just do a better job at condensing all the information. And we do have some character sheets here, but they're mainly used for status updates, writing down gold and other supplies you get. They're not really manage your profile. And
they're mainly tracking things that you're going to carry from episode to episode, not necessarily the things that affect you during the episode.
Yeah.
Kingdom Death has a lot of stats that go up and down, but when you're looking at your sheet, it usually tracks across in the order that you need to take a look at it.
Yeah.
There's a certain mental shift that like, oh, I need to look across here, then I need to look at my fighting arts, then I need to look at my disorders if anything impairs me, and you can also take tokens if it's a temporary like boost or decrease in your stat.
And here you're managing a lot, like I've said. I mean, really, I guess this big criticism section comes down to character optimization and how easy it is to run your character. And right now, it's really difficult to keep track of all the different disparate things.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing I have for direct criticism.
I have a couple other things. Using the heat as a resource, it is very confusing when to know whether you gain heat or whether you're spending heat. It was a reverse track that you had to you had a heat limit of what you could reach, and you had to spend it.
The concept for heat is I do more risky things to get better benefits. In doing so, I put myself at more risk, meaning AI cards are checking for your heat.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like rage. Well, I'm explaining to the audience, because the audience don't know what you're talking about. So the weird thing, though, is it's in the middle of this tracker, and your power is going up, and your health is going down, and your heat is going up and down, sliding back and forth, and it goes up when you activate it. It goes down when you do a refresh step, so it feels kind of opposite of how it should be.
Yeah.
It didn't quite make sense. It didn't feel natural.
Yeah. It felt weird and clunky. I like the idea behind it, but in practice it was weird. I put in here, we talked about it already, the mob. I felt like there were very few tactical decision moments. I felt like a lot of it was looking at my single gear card, rolling that many dice, and hoping that I got a high enough number, but not necessarily having so much modifications to change it, that initial die roll. Another thing that I felt were just like powerful moments when like that was so cool. Like there are certain moments in Kingdom Death when like we high five each other very, very euphorically in the middle of the game because I finally got my Lion Beast guitar back. Like those moments are so epic, and I didn't feel that intense enthusiasm and emotional rush that I do when the highs and the lows in Kingdom Death, they both bring about those emotions.
Yeah.
I didn't feel as attached. But I also am going to bring the caveat that we just dived into a single episode. I don't feel those caveats when I go through
if you did that
the
in
Giga-Lion.
the Giga-Lion,
yeah, the Giga-Lion.
You didn't care about those characters at all.
I didn't, but I still felt really cool movements. Once we figured out how to ride the Giga Train,
that was fun.
That was really cool.
Was
and we figured it out, and it was a really cool experience, but it doesn't give you the highs and lows that the entire game does. Yeah. And I think that was about it. I think we've touched about the rest.
Okay. So I think the last thing that I'll say in terms of what I personally expect from the publisher, because this was one of my most anticipated games of the year.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I am still really, really excited for it. Like I said, if this arrives with a curated gameplay style that fits a single character going out, or fits two people, and doesn't require a management of 4 diverse systems for the narrative and for the story, I want to play this. I think the boss battles, while not as good as Kingdom Death, are still really cool. I think the world and lore is amazing, and I cannot wait to read the different adventures that they're preparing. And I think the promise of a lot of stuff they're doing here is really, really incredible. I just don't know if it's ever going to be better. And that's the thing that puts a halt on, because if it's not better, I don't know why I don't play Kingdom Death.
But if it's different enough and it gives you something else, if it gives you an option to play solo,
so
I think that would be the key where it would shine,
so
if it can get to that
What do I want from the publisher? Well, I wholeheartedly think that they did themselves a disservice by sending every reviewer a copy of the game that is so heavy. I think they were excited about the abilities and the cool effects, but I would have really liked every reviewer to get a single module with one character balanced against a single fight, and have me go on an adventure, have me read my story, and have send Alex, Kara, send Flesh Raider to me, send Renholder over to MVM. And have every player, if they'd given every player
showcase the
just
one
their
character.
Story and just one mob that was perfectly balanced, the conversation I think would be solely different.
I mean, I think they did. I feel like this came 6 months too soon. I feel like another, and I know they have their own reasons for sending it when they did, but I think timeline-wise, it needed another good 6 months of hardcore development and playtesting it amongst themselves, and then offering it to the people nearby who can give them immediate feedback as well.
So what do I want? And they've been working on this for a long time, and there's a ton of work here. I don't want to undermine that. So what do I want when it comes to the final copy of the game? Well, I want every single character to start debuffed. I want them to start flat-footed and a little squabbly. And I want a solo mission that introduces every single character so that when I'm starting the game, I don't play as a cooperative experience. I actually want to dive into a one-shot with my single individual, learning a few abilities, getting 3 cards. Just give me 3 cards to play with. Give me one mob to fight against. Because you're escalating so quickly here that if you throw people in at this stage, a lot of people are going to miss the mark. Whereas I think the story and the narrative that you're journeying through is the coolest part of this. And it's a solo operative game. So give me that solo puzzle with one character and then bring us together as a tribe. And from there, let me gain a card. Let me gain a weapon. Let me gain some experience. And let me level up my character in a way that lets me sink my teeth into the decisions that I'm making. And go in a pathway that I think fits my narrative. That's what I'm expecting. And I can't promise the audience that they'll do that. Yeah. That's the hard part, right? About reviewing and covering a prototype. Yeah. I am still really excited about this game. I really am. You're a little bit less so.
I am more in the middle ground.
Yeah.
I am really strongly fond of Kingdom Death.
Fond of? She's been begging me to play for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, you haven't let me play.
It's been busy.
Weeks. I'm really fond of Kingdom Death, and something that offers the promise of being comparable but different enough and better in some ways intrigues me. But the experience, I would say, was not a positive one.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was very rough and hard to get through that gameplay. We were constantly having to check the rulebook. It went slow. It was tedious. It was just really hard. It was a really rough gameplay. And so I'm weary, but I will give the final copy a chance because I have that optimism still inside me.
Yeah. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Hopefully you enjoyed this coverage. I'm really excited to burp. Apparently, I don't know where that came from. I'm really excited to get a final copy. I'm excited to get Aeon's Trespass Odyssey in here soon because that'll be a big question mark.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. Whatever the case, whatever you do,
remember to do the
get out
important
and
thing.
play some games.
Play Kingdom Death.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.